I never thought a single evening could change the trajectory of my life, but that night did exactly that. My name is Ryan, and until recently, I thought I had a handle on who I was, or at least, the version of myself the world expected. I'm 22, working as a junior graphic designer in a small creative agency downtown, a place where imagination is encouraged but boundaries are still unspoken. On the surface, my life looked typical: office deadlines, casual outings with friends, and the quiet stability of a relationship with Emma. But beneath the surface, I carried a secret, a side of me that I had only ever allowed to exist in private. It wasn't a matter of shame exactly. Cross-dressing had always intrigued me, a way to explore emotions and self-expression that felt alien in my day-to-day life. For years, I had experimented quietly. Weekend afternoons spent in front of my bedroom mirror, choosing the perfect combination of skirts, blouses, and makeup to bring out a version of myself that I rarely let the world see. There was a thrill in it, a heady mix of vulnerability and exhilaration, but it was always controlled, private, contained. Until that evening, I had never imagined that my secret could take over, rewriting not just my habits, but my very identity. The setting of my transformation began in our modest apartment, a two-bedroom space Emma and I had recently moved into. Our home was cozy, a mix of neutral tones and personal touches, shelves stacked with books, framed photos of trips and memories, and an ever-growing collection of succulents along the windowsill. Emma had an eye for detail, and the apartment reflected her aesthetic sensibilities as much as my own. On this particular evening, the apartment felt unusually quiet. Emma was out visiting her sister, and the silence of the space pressed against me like a tangible thing, stirring both anticipation and anxiety. I knew what I wanted to do, but the thought of exploring this side of myself without her awareness made my pulse quicken. Emma and I had been dating for nearly a year. Our relationship was built on trust, humor, and a shared curiosity about life, but there were boundaries neither of us had yet crossed. She loved that I was creative and open-minded, yet she had no inkling about my cross-dressing tendencies. The thought of revealing it terrified me, yet it also whispered promises of freedom, of finally embracing the side of myself that had always been hidden. I loved her, yes, but I also knew that Emma's discovery, or even a misstep on my part, could drastically change everything. That tension made every heartbeat heavier, every decision fraught with excitement and fear. I remember that night clearly. The apartment dimly lit, the golden glow of the desk lamp casting soft shadows on the walls. I had laid out a few outfits on the bed, each piece carefully selected over the past weeks during quiet hours of reflection and experimentation. A navy blue skirt that hugged just the right curves, a delicate cream blouse with lace detailing, and a pair of nude heels that I had recently purchased. Beside them, a small box of makeup rested, a neutral eyeshadow palette, soft blush, a subtle pink lipstick. My fingers trembled slightly as I ran them over the fabrics and textures. This wasn't just clothing. It was armor. It was expression. It was a portal into a version of myself I had longed to embody fully. As I changed, the apartment seemed to shrink around me, every sound amplified. The soft rustle of fabric, the click of my heels against the hardwood floor, my own heartbeat reverberating in my ears. I looked into the mirror and barely recognized the reflection staring back at me. It wasn't just the clothes or makeup. It was the posture, the sway of my hips, the tilt of my head. The mirror reflected a persona both foreign and intimate, a version of me I had only ever allowed glimpses of during solitary moments. And yet, as exhilarating as it was, it also terrified me. Who would I become if I allowed this side of myself to fully emerge? Could I return to the old me, or had I crossed a line with no return? The transformation wasn't merely physical, it was emotional. As I applied makeup, smoothing blush along my cheeks and carefully lining my eyes, I felt layers of my former self peel away, replaced by something softer, more delicate, yet paradoxically powerful. It was a strange duality, vulnerability and strength intertwined. My hands shook slightly as I adjusted the blouse, tugging at the fabric to sit perfectly on my shoulders, then slid into the skirt, feeling it hug my hips in ways that were new and thrilling. The final touch, the heels. Standing up, I wobbled slightly, the unfamiliar height altering my gait, forcing me to move with deliberate care. The sensation was intoxicating, and I caught myself smiling at the reflection, a blush rising in my chest. I was stepping into a new reality, a world where my secret side could breathe, even if only for a few hours. And then, as if sensing my hesitation, a pang of fear struck me. Emma could return at any moment. What if she walked in? What if she saw me like this, fully transformed? My pulse quickened, anxiety mingling with excitement. The apartment felt like both sanctuary and trap. I tiptoed across the floor, practicing movements, adjusting posture, testing how the clothes and heels felt in motion. Every glance at the mirror reinforced the realization I was no longer the person who had started the evening. Something inside me had shifted irrevocably. I paused, taking a deep breath, feeling the silk of the blouse against my skin and the way the skirt swayed with each step. For the first time, I wondered if I could ever return to my old life, to the simplicity of anonymity. The answer eluded me, replaced by a fluttering anticipation and a creeping fear of what might come next. That night, alone in our apartment, I lost my old self, not entirely, but enough to know that the path forward would be irrevocably altered. And yet, the story was just beginning. The thrill of the transformation, the emotional turbulence, and the delicate balance between secrecy and exposure were only the first steps. In the shadows of our quiet apartment, I had no idea how far this journey would take me or what challenges awaited. All I knew was that once I had tasted this new self, there was no going back, not entirely, and that realization set my heart racing in ways I could neither fully embrace nor entirely resist. The night I first fully transformed into the version of myself I had long hidden was exhilarating, but the days that followed turned that excitement into a complex tangle of thrill, anxiety, and obsession. I found myself living in two overlapping realities, one as Ryan, the familiar, socially acceptable version of me, and the other as the delicate, carefully crafted persona that had emerged under the soft glow of our apartment lamp. I began planning my evenings around private transformation sessions, each one a test of skill, confidence, and emotional resilience. During workdays, I played the role of the same quiet, competent junior designer I had always been. I responded to emails, attended meetings, and collaborated on projects, all while feeling an undercurrent of anticipation for the moment I could retreat to the apartment and let my secret self breathe. The tension was intoxicating, the thrill of maintaining a normal facade while harboring a growing, radiant alter ego that demanded attention. Each glance in reflective surfaces, office windows, glossy computer screens, polished doorknobs, became a reminder of the duality I carried, a subtle thrill that made the mundane moments of office life pulse with excitement. The internal struggle intensified as I realized just how deeply I craved the transformation. It wasn't merely the clothes, makeup, or physical appearance, it was the way it made me feel, powerful in my vulnerability, confident in my delicacy, alive in ways that my old self had never known. The first week after that initial night, I experimented with different outfits, textures, and styles. A soft pink blouse paired with a fitted black skirt created a different sensation than a flowing navy dress with lace detailing. Each combination elicited subtle emotional shifts, confidence, apprehension, exhilaration, and sometimes guilt. Guilt was perhaps the hardest to navigate. I loved Emma dearly, and yet I was hiding this essential part of myself from her. The thought of her discovering my secret without preparation made my pulse quicken and my stomach twist. I asked myself constantly, would she accept me, or would she feel betrayed? Could our relationship survive if she knew the full extent of my obsession with transformation? The answers eluded me, replaced instead by a tension that drove my curiosity even further. One particular evening, I decided to push boundaries more than ever. Emma had mentioned staying late at a friend's house, leaving me with several uninterrupted hours. I pulled out the outfit I had been saving for a special occasion, a fitted emerald dress that hugged my curves and shimmered under light, paired with golden heels that made every movement a deliberate dance. As I slid into the dress, adjusting seams and smoothing wrinkles, a shiver of anticipation ran down my spine. This wasn't just dress-up, it was a full embrace of the persona that had been waiting for release. Makeup followed, careful strokes of foundation, blush, and eyeshadow, each application enhancing features that were familiar yet transformed. I marveled at how a few lines of eyeliner and a swipe of soft lipstick could turn a simple reflection into something almost otherworldly. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the wig, a cascade of dark curls falling over my shoulders in perfect symmetry. Standing back to examine my reflection, I barely recognized the person staring back at me. Yet, in that moment, I felt completely alive. The thrill was immediate, but so was the fear. What if Emma returned early? What if a neighbor caught a glimpse? The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage with invisible eyes watching every movement. My heartbeat quickened, every rustle of fabric or creak of the floor amplified in the silence. I moved slowly, testing how my body felt in motion, adjusting posture, tilting my head, practicing subtle gestures that made the transformation convincing. In these private moments, I discovered not only the joy of embodiment but also the vulnerability it brought. Every adjustment reminded me that perfection was fragile. A slip of the wig, a falter in my steps, or a wrong turn could shatter the illusion entirely. And yet, the vulnerability was part of the allure. It forced me to confront my own identity, to embrace both the delicate and powerful aspects of this new self. My obsession grew daily. I began taking subtle risks, testing how far I could push the boundaries without detection. One afternoon, I left the apartment dressed fully in my persona, stepping out to the lobby under the guise of a quick errand. The sensation of moving through the world in public, heels clicking against the floor, skirts swaying, was intoxicating. Every glance from passers-by sent shivers through me. Some looked curious, others indifferent, but the thrill of being observed, even fleetingly, intensified the emotional transformation. I felt more myself than I ever had in the confines of normalcy. At home, I began documenting the transformations. I took photos, practiced different makeup styles, and experimented with hairstyles. Each image reflected a facet of my evolving self, a self that was becoming harder to ignore, harder to conceal. The duality was exhilarating but also isolating. I longed to share it with someone, to have Emma witness it, yet fear anchored me. The suspense of discovery, the anxiety of potential rejection, and the intoxicating thrill of secrecy intertwined, creating a complex web of emotions that I could not escape. Then came the night that changed everything. I had been fully immersed in a new transformation, silver-toned eyeshadow, a soft lavender dress, heels that elongated my legs. I had practiced gestures, practiced walks, and finally relaxed into the persona. But a sound outside the apartment froze me, a key turning in the lock. Emma was home earlier than expected. My heart leapt into my throat, sweat beading along my hairline. I barely had time to freeze, positioning myself near the living room in an attempt to appear casual, to blend my two selves into one. Emma stepped in, her eyes scanning the apartment, noticing subtle signs, heels placed oddly near the door, a wig cap left on the table, makeup brushes splayed out like evidence. Her gaze finally fell on me. Time seemed to slow. I stood there, trapped between fear and exhilaration, unsure whether to flee, explain, or remain frozen. Her voice trembled slightly. "Ryan, what's going on?" I felt the weight of my dual life pressing down. Every instinct screamed at me to retreat, yet a small, defiant part of me urged honesty, urged presence, urged revelation. "Emma, I need to show you something," I whispered, voice barely audible. And in that instant, I realized that my secret life was no longer mine alone. The suspense, the risk, the thrill, it had reached a tipping point. The transformation had become more than clothing or makeup. It was an evolution, a step into a self I could no longer deny. And Emma, the one person I cared about most, was about to witness it all. The night of revelation arrived like a storm I couldn't escape. Emma had returned early from her sister's house, and I had been completely immersed in my persona, a delicate lavender dress hugging my curves and soft silver eyeshadow highlighting the intensity of my eyes. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor as I paced the apartment, trying to maintain composure, trying to anticipate her reaction. The apartment, once my private sanctuary, now felt like a stage lit for an audience I could not control. Emma entered the living room, her gaze flickering between curiosity, shock, and something I couldn't immediately identify. Was it awe? Concern? Disbelief? "Ryan, what is all this?" she asked, her voice steady, yet soft with an undertone of fear. My chest tightened. This was the moment I had imagined countless times during solitary evenings, yet the reality was far more intense. I wanted to explain, to confess everything, to share the thrill, the fear, the longing, but the words clotted in my throat. My hands fidgeted with the fabric of my dress, trembling slightly in the unfamiliar silk. "Emma, this is me," I whispered, voice quivering. "This is who I've been, who I need to explore." The silence that followed was thick, almost tangible. Emma's eyes softened, and she stepped closer, studying me with a mixture of wonder and concern. I don't know what to say," she admitted. Her fingers reached tentatively for my hands, the warmth a grounding force against the storm of vulnerability I felt. I realized then that this moment wasn't just about exposure, it was about connection, about trust, about the delicate balance between fear and acceptance. Before we could speak further, the sound of a knock on the apartment door jolted me. My heart raced. Who could it be at this hour? The knock came again, more insistent. Emma frowned. "I wasn't expecting anyone," she murmured. Panic surged through me. I had taken calculated risks before, but this was different. This wasn't just a private transformation anymore. Someone was at the threshold of discovering the full extent of my secret. I glanced at the mirror, adjusting my wig in a reflexive motion, and tried to steady my breathing. The lavender dress swayed with each tremor, reminding me that any falter could betray everything. "Stay here," Emma whispered, moving toward the door cautiously. I froze, the air thick with suspense, every nerve screaming in anticipation. The hallway was dimly lit, and through the small peephole, I could just make out a figure. My stomach dropped. It was not a neighbor, not a friend. It was Alex, a colleague from work who had been strangely observant of me in recent weeks. Panic surged. If Alex saw me like this, everything could unravel. Emma opened the door, and I caught a glimpse of his expression, a mixture of shock, curiosity, and unmistakable recognition. My heart thundered. He stepped inside before either of us could react, his eyes scanning the apartment, landing finally on me. My fingers clenched the fabric of my dress, nails digging into the silky material. "Ryan, is that really you?" he stammered, eyes wide. The question hit like a tidal wave. My mind raced. Explain, hide, retreat, assert? Every option felt inadequate, dangerous. I took a step forward, letting the dress sway with deliberate poise. "Yes, it's me," I said, voice stronger than I expected. "This is who I am, at least this part of me." The tension was suffocating. Alex's gaze flickered between Emma and me, trying to gauge the situation, the emotional stakes, the boundaries of acceptance. He was not judgmental, not overtly, but the uncertainty in his eyes mirrored my own internal struggle. Could he handle the truth? Could he understand the thrill and vulnerability that had driven me to this point? Emma stepped closer to me, a subtle gesture of support, her hand brushing against mine. I need to understand," she said softly, her tone a mixture of curiosity and care. "Ryan, why didn't you tell me?" The words were both accusation and plea, a mixture of tension and tenderness that made my chest ache. I swallowed hard, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "I was scared," I admitted. "Scared of rejection, scared of losing control, scared that you wouldn't understand." Alex took a cautious step forward, his expression shifting from surprise to contemplation. "You've clearly thought this through," he said, voice measured. "But Ryan, you're walking a fine line. One misstep, and everything could come crashing down." I nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. Every transformation, every expression, every deliberate pose was a risk. Yet the risk was also the thrill, the essence of what made this exploration so intoxicating. My pulse raced as I realized that the stakes had never been higher. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, the walls closing in. I could hear my own breathing, feel the tension radiating from Emma and Alex, sense the weight of my dual identity pressing against the fragile veil of secrecy. My hands trembled slightly, and I adjusted the wig once more, a symbolic attempt to maintain composure in the face of uncertainty. And then it happened, the unthinkable. My heel caught on the edge of the rug, and I stumbled, the fabric of my dress shifting precariously. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity as I struggled to regain balance. Alex reached out instinctively, and Emma gasped softly. The minor accident, a simple misstep, amplified the suspense, forcing every emotion to the surface: fear, exhilaration, vulnerability, and an undeniable thrill at being fully exposed in front of two people I cared about. I steadied myself, cheeks flushed, and met Emma's gaze. I can't hide this part of me anymore," I admitted, voice raw but resolute. "I've lost my old self. This is who I am now." Emma's eyes softened, and she reached for my hands again, squeezing them gently. "Then we face this together," she whispered. The words were a lifeline, a bridge across the chasm of anxiety and exposure. Alex nodded slowly, still processing but remarkably accepting in demeanor. "It's not easy," he said quietly. "But it's who you are. You've taken a risk, and now you have to navigate it." The room fell into a tense silence, the kind that precedes irreversible change. I could feel the weight of expectation, of scrutiny, of moral and emotional judgment, pressing down. My transformation was no longer a private indulgence. It was a statement, a challenge, a revelation. Every movement, every gesture, every breath mattered. And then, a sudden knock at the door froze us all. My heart leapt into my throat. Who could it be now? A friend? A neighbor? I shook my head slightly, unsure if I was ready. The last few hours had been a whirlwind of emotion. Exhilaration, vulnerability, fear, and the raw thrill of being seen in ways I had never allowed myself. And now, this unknown presence at the door threatened to expose me completely. My pulse was a drum in my ears, heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor as I shifted uneasily, trying to find a position that made me feel steady. Emma's gaze softened. "Ryan, whatever happens, we'll handle it. Together." Her words offered a flicker of courage, but the uncertainty outside the door clawed at me like a predator in the dark. I took a slow, measured breath, adjusting the wig, smoothing the dress over my hips, and trying to muster the confidence that had carried me through every transformation until now. Every inch of my being was taut with anticipation. The doorknob turned. Slowly, almost deliberately. My stomach dropped into my feet. Alex stiffened beside me, his eyes flickering between the door and me, trying to gauge my reaction. Emma's hand tightened around mine. The door creaked open, and there was no one there. A chill ran down my spine. I stepped closer cautiously, peering into the dimly lit hallway. Shadows shifted. The hallway was empty, but I could feel the lingering presence of something unknown. Someone had been there, or perhaps still was, hidden just out of sight. My hands shook as I closed the door gently, locking it, but the unease didn't leave. It was as though the world outside our small apartment had just whispered a warning, a reminder that my secret life could never remain fully contained. Emma stepped closer, brushing a stray curl from my face, her eyes searching mine. "Ryan, I think we need to talk about boundaries." "About what this all means," she said softly. I nodded, words failing me. The truth was raw and unshakable. I had crossed a threshold I could never return from. My old self, the version of Ryan that existed only in quiet routine and private reflection, was gone. Lost. And what had replaced him was something fragile, thrilling, vulnerable, and impossible to hide forever. Alex finally spoke, his voice low and cautious. "You're taking a huge risk, Ryan. This is who you are, but the world outside won't always be so understanding. And neither will everyone around you." I swallowed hard, the adrenaline from the near exposure still coursing through me. "I know," I whispered. "But I can't go back now. I can't pretend anymore." Emma's eyes softened again, but there was a flicker of uncertainty. "Then we need to be careful," she said. "Because someone finding out could change everything." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the tension, there was a thrill I could not deny, a sense of power, of authenticity, of finally living fully as the self I had hidden for so long. Then, a new sound pierced the tense silence, a soft, deliberate knock on the window near the balcony. My pulse froze. Emma gasped, and Alex instinctively moved toward the source, but we all froze in unison. The knock came again, deliberate, almost taunting. Someone was watching us. Someone had seen more than I had realized. I took a step back, heels clicking against the floor, my reflection catching in the mirror. This new self, trembling, vulnerable, yet undeniably real. My hands clutched the fabric of my dress, breath shallow, heart racing. The thrill and terror merged into one singular, inescapable truth. My secret life was no longer private. It was exposed, hanging by a fragile thread, and the next moment could change everything. Emma held my hand tightly, her eyes wide with worry and something else, anticipation. Alex's jaw was set, cautious but alert. And outside that window, shadows danced, teasing, threatening, a reminder that the world beyond our apartment was no longer safe, no longer predictable. And then, the final, unresolved thought pierced my mind. Who was out there? What had they seen? Could I protect this new self, or had I truly lost my old life forever? The screen of suspense fades to black, leaving the answer suspended in the air, unanswered, unresolved, and haunting.